As a researcher, everywhere you are is a sort of experience of research, and a big question that's come up for me today in listening to all these inspiring talks is how much are we actually still working in a network mode when we think about data and connectivity, and how much are we really working in an experiential mode? Because I think that's the next stage of digital economy, is really to deepen the experiential mode. And my work is really in that context about seeing arts and creative skill sets as drivers in the digital economy at large. So outside the creative industries box, outside of the arts box. And I think my talk today is the only one that's really going to address what we're focusing on in that context. So I think that's the historic moment we are at now, and I think it's a real challenge for all of us. Most of you will know the Brighton Fuse project. Just briefly, that was a study of the creative and digital cluster within Brighton. Fairly conventional approach, except that it came from an arts and humanities perspective. And it found a number of interesting things, but three that were particularly interesting for the focus that I have, which is that arts, design and humanities skill sets had a very strong balanced presence within the creative and digital cluster in Brighton, and that the fusion of the skills across arts and design and the digital were clearly pivotal in the success of that cluster, and that those businesses that had managed to what we call superfuse that interaction showed some evidence of having added velocity. So there's some very strong and interesting evidence there about arts and design as actual drivers of the digital economy, and for me that's a really important shift to do with what a number of people have touched on today, is that actually data, we keep talking about it in its translated form into computerized data, but data is always about the human world. It's about people. It's about who they are and what they do and how they exist in the world. And actually, I think we need to bring the connection back to that if we're going to be successful in the next stage of the economy. The Fusebox Knowledge Exchange project that I'm involved in now is actually following on from that and looking at how arts and humanities and design skills are relevant to the development of innovators themselves. So rather than looking at innovation, we're looking at innovators in an experimental business support program that's been introduced at Wired Sussex in Brighton, where the participants are actually involved in action research in the project. The other thing that I've been involved in just recently, and the report was launched in May, is a Design Commission report on the next stage of the digital economy, which really says a lot of things in the report, but the key thing that it really emphasises is that design is really pivotal in terms of opening out how we see the digital economy, because it focuses on process and value. So it actually focuses on each stage of what we do in the development of the digital economy. So a lot of what's been presented today could be unpacked much further than it is to see what the value of every stage of the development is. By looking at the issue of value, it allows us, I think, actually to be much more multi-dimensional in the way we perceive digital opportunities. Really, the next stage of the digital economy is being argued to be all about big data and the Internet of Everything. And the Internet of Everything is really about connecting us and our lives and our environments to the digital arena. I mean, it's as simple as that, and to connect us as fully and efficiently and creatively as possible. But I think that the thinking associated with these stages has to be people-centred, it has to be process and value-driven. We've got away with talking about data the way we have, all the time that this digital economy has been about content and things we access and bits of information in the main and experience in a fairly limited way. Once we begin to see the digital economy as embedded within everyday life in very incremental ways, the essential attention to people and the way they live and the way they operate and the way they understand their environments and their lives becomes much more central. And I think this relates to policy or business models or the way that arts organisations think about the way they can connect with audiences. I don't think this has any specificity to it. It is a holistic sense. So what that emphasises for me, that there is a new holistic potential of arts and design to actually make new fusions of political and social development. And a lot of that will come through economic change. Now, what I mean by that is that there's a different configuration of the place of arts and creativity within society. And this is where I'm getting in a little bit more detail about my argument of it as a driver. What I think is happening is that a lot of the way that we understand what drives society is being reconfigured by digital developments, and that isn't just about the relationship being more horizontal and power being more diffuse. It is actually the fact that what digital technologies allow us to do is to be much more creative in the way that we think about other kinds of interactions, whether they're political or social. And that in many ways, digital economy has really made the economy as such much more pervasive in every other area of life. So in a way we have to accept, I think, that the economy, which is about exchange, whether it's profit or not for profit, it doesn't matter, it's still about exchange. The economy will be increasingly the vector through which we pursue other things. And we already see that happening with social media, for instance. We already see an economic vector which is increasingly the means by which people relate in a human way, develop relationships, break relationships, give them texture. So it's already happening. I think now what we need to see is the actual role of arts and creative skill sets within that. What we've allowed the world to do, which is completely natural because of the way capitalism works, is for the economy, the economistic side of things, to actually dominate there, and really for IT to be configured in that way. Now I think we need to pay much more attention, as projects like this are doing and the projects that I'm involved in doing, is the means that arts and creativity give us to actually make those things more people-centred. So one of the things I would say that does is emphasise something that I think is beginning to happen in a lot of the things we're hearing here, but is only beginning to happen. And that's that business and service models will actually be transformed into what I'm calling a full digital context, and that's a transmedia context. And that's a scenario where we're not thinking of media in their separate entities, as arts traditionally has done, but we're thinking much more about how different forms of media inform one another and allow us to come up with very complex models of interaction. And it's a given that it's only arts and design and humanities that are going to give that to the economy. That's not just going to come from IT, because it takes a huge amount of understanding of media, what different media are, and I mean that in the full arts sense, and it takes a huge ability to experiment and risk. I think that there is a different kind of digital looking glass that we're talking about there, and I think one of the things that's evidenced today is that we do need new transdisciplinary and consortia approach, which different actors like the AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, who funded all those projects that including the Design Commission report that I flagged, like Nesta, like the TSB, are actually presenting to us. So for me as a researcher, I never thought I would live in such an exciting time, where I come from a business background and a media background originally, where we actually have innovation isn't just happening in the economy anymore. It really is, in this country, a knowledge society form of innovation, where these different high-level institutions are beginning to work together. So as I say, I think there's some research here in this room today to happen. Thanks very much.